Alrighty, we are live. Welcome everyone to the Feel Inspired Podcast, episode 52. Very excited about today's guest. It's actually a couple guest as well. I think technically you're my first couple guest to come on as well. And we're going to be discussing how you can get the one you want, get your soulmate, even if you're not their type. And I hope I've written that correctly somewhere in the description, just to be sure. You guys made it so complex for me. That's just simple guy.
I know. I was talking about him with the wording, and I was like, "Is it a little bit like convoluted?" But I was like, "We'll explain what we mean. It's okay."
Yeah, we got plenty of time to explain it, so it's all good. But welcome everyone. If anyone's new or just listening to this for the first time, my name's Amit Sodha. I created this podcast to inspire people in so many different ways. We talk a lot about dating, but other subjects too. And today got an incredible pair of guests who we met on Clubhouse actually about this time last year, probably slightly sooner, and we ended up sharing quite a few rooms, dating rooms, slide into DM rooms, shoot your shot rooms. And it was great. Clubhouse was great as well because it gave us an opportunity to just do even more coaching, help even more people. But now Clubhouse has sort of died down a little bit. We've all kind of gravitated away a little bit. But can I just say, Nicola and Fuji, it's an absolute pleasure to have you guys on. And we're going to be speaking. So the subject is we're going to be talking about, getting the person you want, even if you're not their type. We're going to be focusing more probably on the male side, because I know Fuji and Nicola, you specifically cater to men more, but we'll be dealing with both sides as well. Mm-hmm. And I think this is a really powerful question as well. In fact, in some ways, I think it's one of the most fundamental questions, because I get this a lot as well. People do say to me, I like them, but they don't like me. Or, or it's vice versa, the other way around. Like they like me and I don't like them. And it's such a common thing, but people don't get why that is, what you can do about it. And so I think it's a really good idea to dive into the subject that all is not lost when you're in that situation. In fact, it's perfectly salvageable. Doesn't mean you try and force it, but we'll learn more about this right now as well. But without further ado, I'd love to welcome Nicola and Fuji. If you guys can introduce yourselves. You're both dating experts. Nicola, you're an emotional intelligence expert. So tell us a little bit how you guys entered this world of teaching people about dating, and also even a bit about how you guys met. In fact, Fuji, was it down to you learning or knowing some of this stuff that enabled you to,
Oh no, it was all
grab
of it.
It
was about 99.9% responsible for this.
It wasn't love at first sight for me. I'll give you that much.
Yeah. It's actually.
You just mentioned a really cool point, and I just want to just quickly share a story so we can set the scene for everyone listening, or anyone watching, or anyone hearing this for the first time. So one of our best success stories that me and my wife have, we have this Facebook group with about 3,500 members that caters to the South Asian community in the UK. And one couple, they were the first ones to get married, not the first ones to meet, but the first ones to get married. A couple called Ushma and Parish. And I remember their story is such a beautiful story, because I think what happened, how they connected is, I think he liked one of her comments, or she liked one of his comments on Facebook. And then he approached her, asked her out for a first date. She wasn't that interested in him actually after the first date. She wasn't bothered. She was like, meh. But he did what I teach all guys to do. Is he had already prearranged a second date. He planned where they were going, what they were doing. Everything was in the works. And because of that, just for that reason alone, she just thought, sorry, I feel bad letting him down now. I'll just go on this second date.
Yeah.
And it was just something simple, bowling. And he did something which, again, I encourage a lot of guys to do. He was just very playful in the way he did this. He said, I tell you what, if I win, you have to kiss me. If you win, I have to kiss you. And she was like, okay, cool. But, she just had so much fun on this date. It changed everything after that point. And they're married. They've just had their first kid. And the rest is history. So I know you were just about to jump in as well. So over to you guys. I'd love to hear your story, and then we could delve into this subject.
Sure. Okay. So the beginnings of the story was almost 20 years ago. In terms of what we do for work and everything.
There is an age gap. So
there's an age gap. 20 years ago,
ahead of me.
She was in junior, less than junior high, grade school.
We're 11 years apart, so there's a bit of
you guys don't look 11 years different.
We'll
that's either a compliment to me or an insult to you.
I know. Sorry. I either look really old or you look really young.
Didn't mean that. Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's fine. So I guess overall, right? So what we do, obviously, we're dating, confidence, and emotional intelligence coaches. And I've been doing this for 15 years. Nikki less so because she's not that old, but so it started out as I struggled with dating my entire life. I was the guy that, in America we have like prom, we have like school dances. I was the guy that never went to any of the dances because nobody would ever go with me. And so our big event is prom, right? Well, we don't like, everyone made it a big deal, but I didn't go because nobody would go with me, right? So, I went basically through school, and I never had a single girl, even like the kind of less attractive one, ever want to talk to me, ever have a crush on me, anything. And I remember I asked my mom about it one time, and I said, "Hey, what's going on? Like, what's wrong with me?" And she's like, "Oh, like normally the mom's supposed to be like, oh, no, honey, there's nothing wrong with you. You're like, you'll grow into it." My mom's like, like some people have it. Yeah, that's not one of you. Like, that's not you. You just
don't got it.
You don't got it, right? You don't have it. But if you get really good grades and you get a good job, it'll happen for you in the future because, you'll make money and stuff. Not exactly the healthiest belief, but I was like, okay, that's the key, right? And then, when I got into high school, I asked my dad, and he's like, trust me, it'll just happen because it happened for me. And he's like, I had no problem, and I was shorter than you, so it'll happen for you too. And so I was like, okay, I just got to follow my dad's footsteps because my dad was is popular in school. He was like the treasurer for the school. He was like really popular. So I was like, I got to do what he did. So he wrestled in high school. So I was like, I'm going to wrestle. Right. So I kind of followed in his footsteps. So I wrestled, and I did okay. I did decently. And we have these in American pop culture, we have this jacket called the Varsity Jacket. Right. And it means you represent the school, the team. Right. And that's like a big status symbol. So I worked really hard to get that, thinking, okay, this is what all the jocks, all the cool guys, all the football players have this jacket. I got this jacket, and I was like, this is going to change everything because everyone knows the athlete is really popular in school. So I got this jacket, just nothing changed, right? Just everyone still like thought I had like the plague or something, right? And I was like, okay, maybe it doesn't work for like short guys or like Asian guys or whatever. So, I went through high school, had nothing, and then after high school, I went to the Marines. In the back of my head, I thought, well, everyone loves a man in uniform, especially the Marine Corps, right? This is the tip of the spear. This is the elite of the elite, right? And so I went to boot camp, got out, got the uniform, became a Marine, and just even in the uniform, nothing. I'm like, whoa, what's going on? Like, well, I have the uniform and nothing, right? And then later on, I thought, okay, maybe it's not that. Maybe, sorry. My cat just clawed me.
That's all right.
Yeah. So then after the Marine Corps, I was like, okay, that's not the Marine Corps. It's what my mom said, right? It's really money. So that's the key to this, right? So I got out of the Marine Corps. I happened to be in tech, which is a really, fortunate thing. I really like tech. So I stepped into a 6-figure job, and I was like, okay, this is it. I bought a sports car. I bought a house. I was like, this is it. This is where everything changes. So I have a sports car, a house. I was a Marine sergeant. I had like this stacked resume, right? And then I was still invisible to women. And I was like, okay, there's something wrong because I have everything everyone said to do, and there's something wrong. And that's when I eventually realized my mom was kind of right. There's that it factor, right? Like you have it. I didn't know what it was, but there was definitely something I was missing. And so I embarked on essentially what would become a 15, 20-year journey to figure out what that was and to fix it. And along the way, I realized a big part of the it is social skills. And that was the one thing that I never had. And it was the one thing that was never it was never pushed because in Asian cultures, right, you're taught to do well in school, but you're taught to do well at school at the expense of social skills. So when it's time to go to a party or it's time to study, you never get pushed to go to the party. So in all of high school, all of college, I never went to a single party. And I thought that was a good thing. And it was in a way because it makes you very academically competitive. But I didn't realize there's a trade-off to that. Like there's a sacrifice when you don't go to any parties and you don't have friends and you don't do any of that. And that is your social skills are very deficient. And that just isn't a thing in our culture. Like it's just never pushed on us. So I just never realized that was a thing.
It's not a thing in culture in general. Like it's obviously a more extreme in Asian cultures and certain cultures. But in general, our schools don't really push you to be socially good, or parents don't push you to be socially good.
In fact, they pushed it the opposite. They pushed don't go to parties, right? Like study more. And so along the way, I figured out like the big part of the thing that was missing, aside from confidence and a lot of these other things, is I just had very deficient social skills. And so I didn't know how to talk to people. I ran out of things to say. I froze up around women. I didn't know how to kiss a woman. I didn't know how to really go on a date because they don't teach you those things. And there's no real, at least at the time, this is 2000-ish, right? There's no book that teaches you that stuff either, right? So that's when I realized, okay, this is what I need to do. So I essentially self-taught and used mentors to learn, like basically regressively learn all of these skills that I should have had that I didn't because I didn't have anyone to teach me. And even my dad was good at those things, but he didn't know how he was good and he couldn't teach it. So to him, it was just like, just be you. And I was like, the problem is I can't be you. I can only be me. And right now, me doesn't work, right? So unless you can teach me to be you, this is not going to work, right? And he just had no clue. I remember him struggling and just being like, I don't know why I do things. Or, you know, I was like, how do you know when to kiss a girl? He's like, I don't know, you feel it. I'm like, that's not helping me, right? So I had to learn this all myself through trial and error. So in the process, I figured I've probably approached somewhere around the order of 10 to 15,000 strangers over the course of over a decade.
Not bad.
And that's not, I wouldn't recommend that to a lot of people, but it definitely gives you a lot of perspective and it teaches you a lot, because that kind of repetition is like doing anything, you know, like Malcolm Gladwell said, doing anything 10,000 times, 10,000 hours gets you good at it. Now it's a slow process, but it gives you a skill set that, you know, you wouldn't normally have or that no one else has. And that's essentially where Nikki comes in, because what I essentially taught myself to do is through social skills, confidence, and even an understanding of female psychology, I taught myself how to be attractive to women that weren't physically attractive to me. And that's a really important thing when you're, I don't know what it is in do you guys use inches? You do, right? In the UK?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. So when you're 5'4" and Asian, and the average height in the country is 5'9.5", 5'10", right? That's a severe disadvantage. In addition to the Asian, you know, the East Asian thing, in addition to not being classically good looking, right? That's a very severe thing in terms of your disadvantage. And so I essentially had to teach myself, how do I become charismatic, likable, and attractive to women, even when they don't find me physically attractive? And so that is a big part of kind of what I learned. So when I first met Nikki, I love this part of it because it like, I didn't meet her and think we were going to date. Like I met her and kind of in like a social circle type thing. And I met her and her first impression, she didn't tell me at the time, but her first impression is, oh, he's really little. Like she just wasn't attracted to me at all. Right.
Like just a very,
and I would say I was attracted to her.
Literal like feeling, like just an observation. Like he was essentially, you know how they say in like that, what's that movie? He's like a lamp. Like there was just no, like could have been a brother kind of thing. Like there was just no feelings whatsoever. It was just a guy, right? Which is very plain in my mind. And that changed over time because of the behaviors that I saw in him that made him attractive. So we definitely went from something that was very like, I was like very platonic towards him to being like in love with him and having huge crush on him. And me actually being the one coming to him and sort of being like putting the crush kind of forward type thing. And then we worked together. So it was a kind of a weird thing to navigate because we didn't want to ruin our working relationship. So, but for me on my end, that's obviously where he came from. But on my end, I grew up and I have a sibling who is, let's just say like
me,
sort of like Fuji, like socially inept, not confident, didn't kind of, he was okay because he was like a different person at home, but he had a lot of the signs of kind of autism. So he went through life not really being able to date or talk to women. And I was always the one kind of trying to help him and always trying to find ways like, okay, I know he's this type of guy at home. I know he's a good guy. He's a good person. He comes from a really loving family. He has all these great qualities. How come that isn't communicated when he talks to women? Because he wants to date women. So I'm like, why isn't that ever communicated? Why aren't they seeing what I'm seeing? Like I see my sibling as this great person who's really funny and kind and awesome, and they're not seeing it. And that made me realize as well in that process that in like a similar kind of way that you have to teach these things or learn these things if you don't just have them. And I grew up from grade 7 to about grade 10 being really badly bullied in school. And that affected me a lot. And I kind of grew up more on the naturally socially good side. But when I hit that point in high school, it plummeted and I just lost all my social skills because of the self-esteem, the confidence issues, and I basically had to rebuild all that. So in the process of between trying to help my brother, being able to communicate himself to other people, and being able to help myself, I kind of went on this journey of like researching everything you could possibly research, body language, psychology, like how to be friends with people, how to talk, conversations, all those types of things. So that I could help myself kind of rebuild and then also help my brother. And so we kind of ended up learning from similar things, similar tools, similar ways. I had my own mentors. Like I had a really good best friend who was 6 years older than me, and she was just a lot cooler than me. She was very charismatic. She knew makeup. She knew how to talk to guys. She knew everything. And I kind of learnt those things in a mentor kind of way from her, and then combining that quest to help my brother. And then I moved to the US and we kind of met here in the middle in this same, like, I guess, I don't know, this same plane where we were learning the same things, slightly different reasons, but it was essentially the same thing. So we ended up kind of meeting and bonding over that. But it was really his social skills and his way of confidence, learning to speak, be funny and playful, that really kind of made me feel, really attracted to him. And now we're here like 4 years later, 4.5 years later almost.
Yeah. She had never dated, it's funny, there's a couple things. She had never dated an Asian, right? Or at least in America, Asians are like East Asians, in the South, you guys are South Asian, right? But I know it's reversed. What's funny is she made a promise to, when did you promise to? Well, she made a promise to herself after the previous relationship that she's like, okay, the next person I date, my requirement is that he has to be tall, which is hilarious. Well, right? And then also her mom was like, okay, I don't care what ethnicity you date. When she's growing up, she's like, I don't care what ethnicity you date. I don't care like what's going on, what he even looks like. We just ask that he's tall, which is like a cruel joke.
But my mom loves it. My parents love him so much. He's like, they're in love with him. But it was a thing because my ex, it wasn't that I was never one of those girls that has been like, I need a tall guy. In like an extreme sense. It was just that my ex was about 5'8" and I dated him for a really, really long time. And I thought just for fun, I was like, just for fun this time, I just want to know what it's like to date someone, taller, right? Like just to feel that like excitement of different height. I don't know. It was just
like, I'll show you.
I went through a breakup. And God had other plans. But and then I ended up dating someone that was 4 inches shorter and shorter than me technically.
So we have to work out, or you're gonna have to go like 3 feet something.
I love that. And what a beautiful story of how you two came together. But there was a few really key takeaways from that as well. So and we can let's elaborate on these. So obviously, number one, what you're saying essentially is that you were someone who was socially inept, but because it is a learnable skill, you absolutely flipped it on its head. Two, just as in this example, when they first met, Nikki, you weren't attracted to him at all. But he's a nice guy, but you weren't attracted to him.
Just nothing.
But something changed. And funny enough, actually, I've got this guy on my radar. Very similar situation right now. He likes someone, but he doesn't think she likes her at the moment. And he's been asking me all these questions, and I will definitely send this podcast to him when I get a chance as well. But I think there's several takeaways from everything that you guys have said so far. But I think two of the fundamental ones for anyone to take away there from just your opening story was, this is all learnable, and two, things can change. So it's never set in stone, set in stone. And I have to say, Fuji, as well, very similar experience from my part as well. I was one of these people who was so good with people when it didn't come to when no traction was involved. But as soon as attraction was involved, I turned into some weird freak of nature, women defined as a creep and, you know, all sorts. Like, hey, listen, I'm sure there's still 1 or 2 people out there still think I might be a creep. I don't know. I can't.
There's a lot of them for me.
We can't control what everyone thinks of us, but it was just, you know, that was a common theme.
Could you say that again?
No, Siri, I can't say that again.
I like how Siri has an English accent over there.
You can actually change it. So on my phone, it's actually an Indian accent.
Oh, that's funny.
I love that.
That's funny.
That's cool.
But the other thing I was going to say, by the way, Fuji, as well, the other thing that was really fascinating there, as you mentioned, obviously, firstly, the height thing. And because a lot of my clients are South Asian in the UK, South Asian men tend to be a little bit shorter as well. I think the average height is more like 5'5", 5'6". Yeah. Right. And it's interesting because on our matchmaking system, a lot of and I do say this, and I've kind of pointed this out, that there's a little bit of double standard that I feel, because a lot of women do mention they want a guy who's above 5'10". And I kind of put myself in the firing line a little bit for this because I set that, you know, those levels, and I wish I could go back and change that because I would have completely eliminated that. But it just goes to show that for some people, height is such a big thing. And not only from the women's perspective of wanting someone tall, but from the guy's perspective, it being a hang up, essentially. Mine was never height. I'm a giant. I'm 6'3", right? But but for me, it's always been the weight thing. And so that was my big hang up above anything else. It was the opposite. You know, I believe that no woman's going to love me because I don't have a six pack. I'm not slim. I'm not, you know, a typical shaped guy. I don't even have an hourglass figure. I just have that huge, you know, like someone stuck clothes inside me, and then my legs are like tonk and built, but then all my weight is in my midsection. So yeah. So
quick aside, did you read the study on that recently? There's some new research that South Asians have a higher prevalence of holding on to weight because of multiple generations of famine, and it is basically gotten into the DNA. And there's a genetic adaptation that South Asians carry more weight as an adaptation to not dying from famine. Wow, and it's a fascinating study. It doesn't even sound real until you look at the data, and you're like, wow, that is fast. Because I have a lot of South Asian clients, and they're like, why is it so hard to lose weight?
Yeah.
I mean, and like everyone's different, but they're like, no, for us, it's really hard. And I looked into it, and that they're not exaggerating. It's a real thing. Yeah,
it's interesting, isn't it? Because they did this experiment. There was a documentary in the UK, and they put everyone, like a whole group of people from different backgrounds, on like a McDonald's diet or something for a few. I think it was 30 days, right?
Yeah.
Everyone gained weight except the Japanese guy.
Interesting.
His weight did not change.
Interesting.
And all the others took. Like he literally, I mean, it was a minuscule change for him.
Yeah.
But all the others, everyone else in the experiment gained weight. And everything else went up, their cholesterol, their sugar, and all that. But the Japanese guy, his didn't change. It's just it blows your mind, isn't it? Right?
Yeah, that is interesting. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Back to subject.
Sure, yeah.
We can talk about all this other stuff all day long. All right. So cool. Now, you're in a situation where you've not had much luck with people or dating in general. Where does one person start? Like you said, perhaps you're someone who tries and tries and tries and tries, but just never seems to get anywhere. Always gets classified as the friend zone, just not interested, no thank you, all of the above. Where does someone start? Where can they kind of begin? And from your experience, you know, what did you do? How did you begin? Because like you said, your father was it, but couldn't articulate it.
Sure. Yeah. I think the first thing is the kind of realization or the understanding that a lot of people are trying to go for outcome and they're not changing the thing that makes you. So it's essentially in business, I always use this analogy. In business, it's like if you have a crappy product and you're like, why isn't anyone trying to buy my product? Let me sell harder. The problem isn't the selling harder. The problem is your product isn't very good. Now, in this case, the product is not necessarily like who you are as a person. It's just your social skills, right? So a lot of people are trying to say, I want to get more dates, or I want to get this outcome. I want to get dates. I want people to like me. But they're working on how do I get them to like me and not how do I improve myself so that I'm more attractive to that person. And I think that's the focus on skill set, I think, is the big mental shift that a lot of people need to kind of go towards. And that's hard because we've been taught for so long that your soulmate is someone that there will be love at first sight. And that sounds really good because of Disney movies.
Yeah. And it's just going to like happen and everything's going to be fantastic.
Right. And it's just not true, you know, not always at least. Right. And if you're not one of the people that has the Prince Charming and the princess type story, well, then it may not work like that. And it may be that you need to do something about it. You may not be naturally gifted. Right.
And this acceptance that you can do something about it, I think is the first step as well. There is a lot of pushback. And there is a lot of pushback specifically, I think, geared towards men in learning this. For some reason, there seems to be a little bit of a double standard. Like if a woman goes on and looks at YouTube videos of like how to talk to guys better, it's cute and it's fun. But if it's how to talk to women better, it's weird and it's creepy. And yes, I know there are some really weird and creepy coaches and teachers out there that do teach distasteful things, but I think this acceptance that this is a skill set that you can learn, and if you remove the kind of feeling that you should already know this and being hard on yourself, then you can really start from step one of, okay, where do I go from here?
Yeah, when we get into brass tacks, right, the actual things, right? So when I first start working with someone, I first interview someone, and they're like, well, what are the skills that are necessary for me? Well, everyone's a little bit different. So your deficiencies might be different from the next guy. But at a kind of baseline, if you can't, say, hold a conversation with a stranger without running out of things to say, that's a very important metric. Because that means that she's going, if we're talking about men, it means she's going to be nervous pretty much the whole time that you're going to make it awkward. And she can't really open up and really just kind of be herself and be present because she's always wondering or worried about, oh God, what if he runs out of things to say and it's awkward, right? So that's a good metric. That's kind of a good thing to kind of realize you have to be able to do that. Can you make someone laugh on command, right? Can you flirt with someone and not make it creepy, right? Flirt with someone to where they're very receptive. Like flirting isn't an inborn thing for most people. It's a learned skill set. And if you didn't learn it growing up, to learn it now. Can you increase like physical intimacy without it being weird? That sounds like, for so many people, that sounds so like organic in the sense that like, oh, it just happens. But if it doesn't happen, what do you do? So I tell my guys, look, everyone knows how to kiss a girl when she leans her head against you and gets really close to you and basically tries to kiss you.
She's like, come on.
Yeah, we know how to do that. Even as bad as I was, I knew how to do that, right? But what happens when she sits sort of next to you, but not that close?
Or she's shy and she's
shy and doesn't like make it easy for you. Then what? Now there's a skill involved. Because how do you close the distance without it being weird and suddenly lunging in and hope that it's the right time, and it may not be the right time, and then it's weird? Like, now what do you do? And that's when the skill set comes in. And so now you have to know what to do and how to do it. And you have to practice it enough times to be able to execute on it. And so everyone, like I said, everyone's a little bit different. But when you're starting out, a good way to kind of evaluate this is literally take a sheet of paper out and say, okay, what are my symptoms? What are my actual difficulties? Where am I struggling? And sometimes it might be conversation. Sometimes it might be I can talk to people, but there's no spark there. But first figuring out where your symptoms are, and your symptoms will tell you where your root cause is, because the root cause is very, very close to where the symptom is, right? It's usually there or one step back. And so that gives you an idea of what to work on next. So again, if you run out of things to say, then conversational and social skills are a very big thing. That's where you start. If you don't know how to flirt, then obviously it's flirting, right? If it feels like, oh, there's no spark, that usually tells you there's no sexual tension. And that doesn't mean talk about sex. That means learn how to flirt, learn how to make her laugh, and use the laughter and the humor and then those things in order to create sexual tension. So each one of the symptoms will kind of lead you back to kind of the root cause. And that's where you can start from, because you're troubleshooting your own difficulties and your own areas to work on.
Yeah, I think that's a really good, you've put it very eloquently and clearly actually as well, because I think some people just get very confused with all of this kind of stuff. But like you said, you tackle one point at a time. And once you do that, you can, once you acknowledge it, become aware of it, you can address each one individually and work at it. I've got a client at the moment, similar sort of thing. And this is a common thing as well. Exactly what I said. Someone talking about, being able to communicate with anyone in any condition, but as soon as it's a date or attraction is involved, that's it. They freeze up, clog up, don't know what to say. The whole interaction just becomes awkward and silent, and as well. And I don't think people realize just how there's nothing wrong with silence, of course, but just when you're in the dating mode or you're meeting someone trying to get to know them, then when there's silence, awkwardness can come in, and then that's where any sort of potential of spark is kind of just killed, isn't it? It's just eliminated. It just goes. So a couple of questions actually, so I've just seen in the comments as well. How do you deal with first date rejections, and how do you deal with pressure from Indian parents to get married? We'll come back to that one. Do you recommend going day gaming to learn how to flirt? Day gaming is when you approach random girls and start conversation with her with the aim of getting her number.
Okay, so I would like to start with one little thing. I just have to say
this one as well. Steve Lamar, by the way, just says, "Tell Fuji set as low and thinks you two should collaborate." I love it. Yeah, thank you very much, Steve. I agree. Go on. Sorry, Linda.
I was just going to say quickly with the second question, there's already kind of an error that I see in the way of thinking with that question, is in terms of the approach to day gaming is that when you approach a random girl to start a conversation with the outcome of getting her number. And that's not really something we teach, and it's not something that we encourage, because that is being outcome based. And if you're outcome based, you're not really there to learn a skill set. So if you're going out to talk to women to get a number, what are you doing? You're trying to make them like you, and making them like you is not how you practice the skill of whatever it is you're trying to do. So maybe you're just at the level where you need to be continuing a conversation. You need to be able to make her laugh and make her engage. The other point with the number is, a lot of men think that just because they get the number, that means that they had a good interaction with that person. As a woman, I can tell you very much that that's absolutely not true. And it's such a bad metric for how well the conversation went, because so many women will give you the number to make you go away.
Yeah.
They'll either give you a fake number, they'll give you a real number, and they'll just ghost you, which is why you have a lot of guys in situations saying, "Oh, I got 10 numbers, but only one really is messaging me back." Why? Because they were doing that because they wanted you to go away. And it's a lot easier as a woman to be safe and give a number than worry, is this guy going to harm me in some way if I don't? That's just a lot easier of a decision for us. So first of all, with that question, I would take out in your approach to day gaming, even getting numbers. If she offers you a number, then we're good. That's a great step. You've probably done something right in the interaction. Let her offer it. But outside of that, I don't believe that it should be collecting numbers. And that's not really our philosophy.
Some girls have caught on that guys will go away and they will offer the number out of the blue. Like the guy will walk up and they'll just immediately offer, "Hey, take my number," because they know the guy will be happy and walk away and not assault them and not harass them. And then just, it's a fake number, or they don't respond. Right. And that's because they've caught on that a lot of guys are doing it for the ego. And sometimes it's just, the head's in the right place. They just don't know any better, because the society says phone numbers mean something. So it kind of sounds right. But in reality, a phone number is what we call in the tech world a vanity metric. It's a metric that doesn't really matter, but it looks like it matters. It looks like it pumps your ego up, but it doesn't actually change anything. It doesn't move the needle.
It's the problem with also a lot of these YouTube kind of channels that are teaching guys, and TikTok channels that are teaching guys, that are going out and their whole videos are just going up to girls and basically coercing numbers out of them. And then unfortunately, guys that don't have much experience are like, "Wow, that's so
look
cool.
At the number. Yeah.
They got a number," because they haven't been shown any different. They haven't, and because they're not really getting to that stage of positive interactions, they don't see anything wrong with that, because they don't know really what the other side of that looks like.
Yeah, I always say that getting a phone number in martial arts, getting a phone number is like doing like flying spin kicks. Like it looks really cool.
Cool,
but
yeah.
It doesn't. That's not what you do in fighting. Like no one does that in fighting, right? It's just a flashy, fun-looking thing. And there's a time and a place, but for the most part, it's mostly just. And that doesn't mean you can never get a phone number. It just means the allure of it is that it looks cool more so than it is an actual important functional thing to focus on. And a lot of guys are still focusing on that, and so that's kind of the issue.
And I was gonna add to that as well. Just say that I think for me, it's like since we got a dog, right? My wife has always seen this side of me that I'll always chat to anyone at any time anyway. But since we got a dog, right, we've got a massive dog community where we live. And, you know, you can't go walk 5 minutes without bumping into another dog and then having a conversation.
Yeah.
But what that beautiful example has taught me is that, and even before this, I knew this anyway, but it just meant that I was able to start a conversation with anyone at any time, right? And you can do that. You've got something that connects you straight away, and you can start a conversation with pretty much anyone anytime. And what you're doing is looking to create a real connection with people. And like for me, I'm with you guys. This whole day gaming thing, really, I would just go speak to anyone. If you're in the park, someone's feeding the ducks, and you want to feed the ducks with them, go have a conversation with them about feeding the ducks. They're looking at a particular tree, they want to hug it. Go have a conversation about that, woman or man or otherwise. But don't make it, like you guys put it beautifully, don't make it outcome based. Just do it because you're cultivating your skills within to go and speak to anyone at any given time. And that is far more valuable to you than trying to just make it about getting a number, which will pay far more dividends in the long run.
Yeah, I don't mind the idea of walking up to strangers and starting conversations. I think that's a very valuable tool to have, but it's just the focus. The focus needs to be, and we always tell the guys, the focus is on skill set. You're trying to be a better version of you. You are not trying to get an outcome or trying to get women to like you. And it's so counterintuitive because they're like, well, why can't I get women to like me? You can. It's just they run from that behavior.
They can sense it.
That behavior is needy. Yeah.
It's not new to us. Like that men are trying to come up to us for a specific reason to take something from us in some way, whether that's emotional, whatever.
The example I always give guys is, okay, like I coach for a living, right? We coach for a living. Imagine if my approach to you or my kind of how I approached you or how I talk to you is I didn't try to help you. That was just a byproduct. What I'm really trying to do is get as much money from you as possible. Would that make you want to work with me, or would you run away? Like, no, I would never want to work. Yeah, exactly. That's what the idea of talking to someone and trying to get something from someone, that's the same vibe. It just makes you want to go away. But if you're going instead for your own, say, development or to enrich someone's life, or like even the conversation, right? Not for an outcome, but for something else, then that takes away that neediness, that like value taking mindset. And so that's why that's so important, because a lot of guys are going out and they're trying to get something from people, and people can smell that a mile away.
And especially women, I think they're more intuitive and they pick up on it much quicker than we do.
Yeah.
We're a bit slow. We're a little bit like, something Homer Simpson style, but yeah, I agree.
What I tell guys to kind of answer his question, what I tell guys is when you go out to work on a specific skill set. If you're going out and doing approaches and you don't know what you're doing, you don't know what you're focusing on, you're making a mistake. And focusing cannot be on like, oh, get a number or get her to kiss me. No. That's not skill. That's outcome. If you don't know what skill you're working on to try to get better at, then you're making a mistake, because it's like going to the gym and not knowing what you're going to work on. You just, I just do whatever I feel like. I'll do some like neck things and like I'll jump up and down. Like, no. You have to know what you're working on. That's why all the stereotype of the guys like, oh, what are you working on? Oh, back and buys. Like, oh, chest and try. Like, because they know what they're working on, and you have to go out with kind of knowing what you're trying to get better at, knowing what you're working on.
Also, I think targeting what you're working on as well, and not biting off more than you can chew. So if you're going to go out to day game to learn how to flirt, I would be asking you, do you at least know how to keep a conversation going with no overly awkward silences? Do you know how to make her laugh first? Do you know how to be playful? Because these are all things that come before flirting. So I wouldn't be like, go day game to go flirt with a girl when you don't even know how to come across quote unquote normal to her, or if you're like you said before, like creeping her out or something like that. Because you have to have these foundational steps in place that are just the crux of conversation. Are you good at just the crux of conversation first? Then let's go with the gym analogy. It would be like trying to bench press 300 pounds before you've even like learned
do the bar
or learn how to have a good form. So a lot of guys get really excited because they see these things or they imagine these outcomes and they want to kind of achieve those, which is great to have good high standards and a drive. But it's also that thing like when you get excited to try something new, you want to go to the top thing when you really need to start at the very bottom and make sure you're hitting all the basics first.
Definitely. 2 more questions from AN75. We'll come back to those anyway, so stay with us and we'll answer those shortly. But I wanted to get back to specifically this point, if you're someone and you've met someone and you know, you deep inside your head, you're going, oh my God, I love this person. I want to marry this person right now. But you know, you manage to maintain your composure somehow. But you've either got the impression or they've indicated that they're perhaps not interested as much as you are. So what would you suggest to anyone who's in that position? So one, I guess, is not sabotaging it, keeping the door open somehow so that there is a chance that it could change, just as it did for you guys and it did for that example I gave earlier, so that you can then potentially create a future. Now, of course, there's always a chance in my book that there's not going to happen. You just need to accept that no matter what. But at least if you do everything you can, knowing you've done everything you can, at least you can say, look, you know, I tried, and you know, I've walked away with my head and heart clear that I did the best that I possibly could. But back to the original question. So someone who's in that position, they've met someone already very kind of like, I really want this person, but they get sent to the other person not feeling the same way. What would you suggest to them? The first thing to, like, the things to do, the steps to do?
You're not gonna like my answer.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
you're not gonna like
unfortunately.
My answer. So so I have a martial arts background, and if you were to ask me the same question in martial arts, it would be like, you're getting mugged or you're getting assaulted.
Same thing.
You're getting assaulted, and this guy is trying to beat you up, and you have no training. You're not ready. You don't know any martial arts, and he's gonna try to take your wallet. What do you do in that moment to defend yourself? You don't. You run. You run. You give up your ball. You know why? Because it's too late to train. It's too late. You're getting assaulted. You cannot learn martial arts in 2 minutes. And there's no one technique I can tell you over the phone or on a video thing that will suddenly make you a ninja. It doesn't work. The time to train was before you got assaulted, right? The time to dig the well is before you're thirsty. By the time you're thirsty, you're already dying, right? So unfortunately, this sounds very pessimistic. In a scenario like this, whenever I get this question, it's okay. Understand this person's probably not that special. Like for the vast majority of guys that I coach, she's probably not that special. You're probably projecting your ideal woman onto her. You probably don't really know her that well. Yeah. It's probably you just projecting like your ideals onto somebody. Yeah. So don't sweat this. Like this is probably not the actual person for you. The second thing is this is a very good incentive to start getting your skill set up, because assuming the reason she's not into you is because your skill set is deficient, which is most guys, there's like I can tell you that will immediately get your skill set up in the next 5 minutes. It doesn't work like that. What this should do is, like you said, shoot your shot. You know, assuming this is not your boss at work or your boss's daughter or something, assuming there's no big consequences to you screwing up, it's, hey, give it your best shot. Be respectful, but give it your best shot. Do your best, you know, like cover your head and try not to get hit in the head too much. You know what I mean? If you're getting assaulted, but you're not going to be a ninja tomorrow or tonight, right? Do your best to get through this. If it doesn't work, understand she probably wasn't that special in the big picture anyway, and use that failure, if that's the case, to drive you to be better, because this is where it matters. This is where you have to train for the actual girl who's the right girl. When she walks into your life, like when Nikki walked into my life, the only thing that mattered at that point, in that moment, was, am I ready for this? Did I train for this moment? Just like in martial arts, when you get assaulted, the only thing that matters is, did you prepare for this? If you did, you'll probably come out ahead. If you didn't, you're going to get beat up or worse or killed or whatever, right? And so our philosophy is always you train for that moment, especially for the life and death moment, for the big moment. You're not, along the way, you'll train for, there'll be dates and other things, but you're really training big picture for that big moment when you meet that once in a lifetime girl. And for me, that was clearly Nikki, and I was ready. And that's why I capitalized. And that's why I was able to make this work. But if thank God she didn't come to me 15 years earlier. I was
going to say, if
she would have walked out of my life
like 10, 15 years early, it wouldn't have happened. And it sucks to say, but we're very much realists in that way. We don't really sugarcoat things like, oh no, I still would have given him a chance. Like, no, I can really honestly say like, no, because he didn't have the skills to be able to showcase who he is. So then people say like, be yourself. Okay. But sometimes you don't have the skill set to be yourself because all the other crap, the nervousness, the like stuttering or the inability to have a conversation properly is getting in the way of you really showing who you are and who you can be. Or if you're a really funny guy behind closed doors, you don't have the skills to show that in front of the woman that you like, then that's not going to work for you. So we would say if we met each other earlier, there wouldn't have been that chance. So this is why we're so big on telling guys you need to cultivate that skill set as soon as possible, and know that that's going to be there for you when you do meet that person. And like Fuji said, a lot of the people that the guys we coach, when they do find a girl, they're so adamant, like, oh yeah, she's the one, this is it. And a kind of caveat to this is a lot of people actually don't know how to assess whether the soulmate is actually the soulmate, because it might just be the most attractive girl that happens to have been into him at that time.
Yep.
So he's like, oh, this must be it, because I've never had a girl that pretty or that successful or that whatever be into me. So that must be it. And then we go into another kind of skill set, which is being able to break down compatibility and values and understanding what actually does make you guys soulmates. If you are, is there that compatibility there? So that's a skill set in itself. So like you said, unfortunately, there's no magic pill. There's no quick, thing that can get you going well in that situation. If you are in that situation, you basically have to try your best with the skill set you already have.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say at best, learn to manage your investment levels, because I think where most people, not even just men, women as well, go wrong when they find that person they really like, do not project your life with them. Do not future project where I'm going to be married to her and this is, we're going to be together forever. Remove that, because that will always get you in trouble, because then you're operating from a place of neediness. You're operating from a place of, I have to make this work. And what happens when we really want something to work and we have to try too hard at it, we usually sabotage it, as you said. So coming from a place of managing your investment levels, not getting overexcited if you are in that situation prematurely, would be the first step that I would recommend.
Yeah, there's depending on the situation. If I know all the details, like you can usually give little tips here and there, but the tips are basically akin to like run, right? Or protect your head. They're not like, oh, take your samurai sword out and win the day. Like, unless you already have the sword and know how to use it, you're not going to manifest the sword in the 5 minutes you're getting assaulted.
We're a little bit like Miyagi Dojo.
yeah.
I'm going to start Fuji, Mr. Miyagi.
Been watching too much Cobra Kai lately, I think.
Yeah, love it. Love that show.
Yeah, so we're very much realists in that sense. And unfortunately, that's not the answer a lot of people want to hear, but that's the answer that exists in the real world.
I agree with you. I actually agree with you 100% as well. Not everyone will get that. And, this is what I say to people as you're preparing for that big moment in advance now. So that, and you've given me some beautiful sound bites, and I love what you said. And I think what you just said a few minutes ago, I want every guy to hear this, and I will literally create this into a sound bite. You are projecting your ideal woman onto the woman in front of you, and so many guys I know who do that.
Yeah.
And it's such an unhealthy thing to do as well. I mean, it's a natural thing to do, but it's one of these things that you just live in that fantasy world constantly, and it ends up hurting you long term, because you end up being single for much longer. Just keep doing it. Before you know it, you're 14, you're still single, and it's like, well, people have tried to tell you, but you're still doing the same thing over and over again, and it's just it's harming you. So AN asked 2 further questions. We'll answer these and then we'll come back to this. Question 1: how can an introvert as a guy develop the skills to be in a long-term relationship? Okay. And question 2: any tips for speed dating?
Sure. Okay. So the first one, I'm actually very introverted. I'm probably in terms of extroversion, I'm probably bottom 5 or 10th percentile. So I'm very, very introverted. Like this whole pandemic, everyone was like, oh, I'm stir crazy. I got to get out of the house. I'm like, nah, we've been quarantined because of Nikki's thing for like 2 years. I'm good. I do not need to leave the house.
Going too. I'm introverted as well, but he's on another level. Like he could just literally not leave the house and be good. I would be like, I need to go to the grocery store. That's me getting out, and being excited. I'm still very introverted, but he's like next level.
I never would have guessed from this conversation, by the way.
So here's what's really interesting. When you take a big 5 type analysis, right? Jordan Peterson has a thing called Understand Myself. And it's written by psychologists. Even when I talk to psychologists and we do an analysis of extroversion, introversion. Remember, introversion is you acquire energy by being in small groups or by yourself. And extroversion is you acquire energy by being in larger groups, right? It's not actually your behaviors and your actions and whatever. But because everything is associated with those actions, when I take that big 5 test, I come off extremely extroverted. Yeah, when people meet me, they think I'm extremely extroverted. But when you actually look at the definition of the word and of the concept, I'm actually not. I'm actually very introverted. And it basically took an expert in psychology to basically tell me, because for a long time I was like, oh, I'm extroverted. Look, every test says I'm extroverted. Yeah. I'm very extroverted. Like everyone thinks I'm extroverted. I'm extroverted. He's like, no, you're not. You are introverted but you possess extroverted tendencies or behaviors. So you look on the surface. It'd be the equivalent of like, you're actually African, but you look Indian. You know what I mean? Like Mindy Kaling's brother, he got into med school by pretending to be black. Same idea. Like he looked black, but he was Indian, right? So in terms of introversion thing, introverts, it's not necessarily a bad thing in the sense that you can never do anything. It's the sense of introverts tend to be shy and tend to have lower social skills, but that doesn't have to be the case. So if you tend to skew more towards introversion, the key is start taking on the behaviors and the mannerisms and the actions of someone extroverted. And you can acquire the skills of an extrovert even while you're not actually extroverted. So that means an extrovert will go to parties. He will talk to a lot of people. He'll surround himself with people because that's how he acquires energy. An introvert tries to stay by himself. You can't really learn a lot of social skills from that. So if you put yourself in those environments, you go to parties, you go to clubs, you go to those things, you talk to everyone as if you're an extrovert, you will eventually acquire the skill set as if you are an extrovert. And that skill set is very, very useful kind of in dating and social life and everything else. And so that essentially makes you an introvert with the skill set of an extrovert. And I think that's the key. That's how you be successful in that. In terms of a long-term relationship, you don't actually need to be extroverted or introverted to be in a long-term relationship. That's a completely different set of skills. And even guys that are really good at dating aren't necessarily good at long-term relationships. Yeah. So there's not, in my opinion, there's not really a lot of correlation between introvert and extrovert in terms of a long-term relationship. It's more extroverted people find it easier to date and introverted people find it more difficult. But in terms of long-term relationships, it's more about
once you're in the relationship, you still need
I wonder as well. Skills. I wonder if partly he's confused the word introvert for shy.
Yes.
That is very common.
That is. Yeah. It is. And there's an interesting thing that a lot of people don't realize is shy is not a personality characteristic. Mm-hmm. Shy is a defect. Yeah. Shy is a bad habit. It's a bad habit. Yeah. It's not a person. It's not, you won't find it anywhere on the big five, on the actual big five of personality. It's not, it's like saying it's like saying psychopathy is a personality character. Like, no, it's not. It's a disorder, right? Okay. Like shyness is a learned bad habit more so than it is a personality characteristic, which means you can fix it, but you have to actually put in the work. And so that's an important distinction because a lot of people think like, oh, I'm shy. Like, no, you're not. You've learned to be shy and that's a bad habit and you can unlearn it, right? You wouldn't say like, I'm a nose picker. I just pick my nose and there's nothing I can do about it. That's just my personality. Like, no, it's not. You learned to do it and you didn't learn not to do it. Right. So in terms of speed dating, I'd say do it often. In terms of like some quick tips, do it often. Do not try to get people to like you and stand out. And stand out is the biggest tactical thing. And
ask
that means
interesting questions, not just be it's my turn, buddy. Ask interesting questions and not just the generic. Most people that are going to speed dating scenarios are going to be asking, so what do you do for a living and where did you grow up? And that's going to become very monotonous, very quick, really quick, easy way you can stand out is come up with some really interesting questions. Maybe not ones that are so deep that you're going to need like some sense of rapport first or like 10 minutes long to get into it. Like you just made her start opening up about how her mom left when she was little. And then next, like you've just caught her off guard there. That's probably not going to be great, but interesting questions that are going to like make you stand out, get people talking. Fun questions in terms of interesting is probably better as well. If you can get her to be laughing and having a good time, things like, I wouldn't go embarrassing stories so much because I feel like it's overdone now. Everyone's always like, what was your most embarrassing moment? But things along that line of where you can share kind of fun things and people don't think that that's a good thing to do because you're like, well, I didn't learn anything about them. Like, no, you actually learned more because you learned more about who they are, the personality, how they converse, and you get more of a sense of their vibe than if you ask them, where did you grow up and what do you do for work?
Yeah, you need to attract before you connect. And a lot of people don't realize that. They're going immediately for connection. You need to attract first because if you're just really good looking and she's really attracted to you, it works to just go to connection because you already have the attraction. If you don't have that, you have to create that first, then go to the connection. Just like in salesmanship, before you take a test drive, you have to be interested in the car. Otherwise, why would you take a test drive? So if I just push you to take a test drive, you're like, I don't even want this car, right? It doesn't work. You have to want the car first. So that's the same kind of idea. We actually have a list of questions that we provide our guys that helps with that. So I guess, I'll post it on my Facebook. So follow me on Facebook. You can look up facebook.com/DJ Fuji, and maybe we'll put a link up and I'll post it there. And then you guys can download the list of questions, and it's sorted by category, and it's sorted by like when you ask the question. And a lot of the playful ones are really interesting for speed dating. So every other guy is saying, like, where are you from? What do you do? And you're saying, if you could have one superpower, what would it be and why? Right? Or would you rather be able to fly, or would you rather be able to like see through walls? Right? You have interesting questions that make people think, and that immediately sets you apart from everyone else. And that's such a big advantage, because in speed dating, everyone starts to blend together because they all say the same things. So unless you stand out physically, you're going to lose in that pool.
We actually do. We do this thing as well, my wife and I. When we do our speed dating events, we have this thing. We have literally we pin up sheets all over the place wherever we do it. And we say, here's 10 questions you're not allowed to ask. Here's 10 alternative suggestions. And it is always those things. What do you do? Where are you from? And the other thing I was going to add as well, if you're feeling comfortable, if you've done it a few times and you're feeling good, I think attaching a short story to each of those questions also goes down really well.
Yes.
I mean, the power of storytelling is what builds rapport. This is how we grew. How we developed as human beings around a campfire telling stories, right? So storytelling is what connects us. So if you attach a story to it as well, when you're ready, like it's an advanced skill, I'd say. But when you do, it really ramps it up to another level. People are like, wow, they almost feel like they know you as well. They feel
exactly.
like, it's incredible.
Yeah, storytelling is so underrated. But the problem is it's so hard to learn. You have to put a lot of work into it. But when you do, you can see it. One of my best friends, I always wondered how he could walk into a room and just capture everyone's attention. You could walk into a party, and within 5 minutes, everyone's crowded around him listening to a story. And at the time, I was like, I could never do that. Like, that's impossible. Like, I don't know how he's doing that. It's some natural inborn talent. And no, it's a learned thing, but it takes a while. You got to practice it a lot.
Yeah, it does. And this is the thing. You have to use all these opportunities available to you to practice, not just at those moments, but do it with your family, your friends, and just the more you do it, the better you get at it. And there's no substitute for that, for repetition and just doing it.
Right.
And just ask one last question as well. And I think this is an interesting one, but we'll answer this as well. Thanks for answering my questions. Last question. I have many weaknesses and baggage. I have a lot to say about baggage. Should I work on these things first and then start dating, or find someone who is willing to accept my weaknesses? And actually, by the way, I just want to say, and that's a very valid question you ask as well. And the fact that you're asking this shows that you have a lot of intelligence to put something like this out there. So I applaud you. And so I'll let these experts answer today. I think everyone hears enough from me anyway.
That's a really good question. What I would recommend, so keeping in mind, we don't know what the weaknesses are, and we don't know what the baggage is. So hopefully the baggage isn't like homicidal tendencies, right? Like hopefully it's, that being said, not knowing what they are specifically, what I would say is when you work on weaknesses and baggage, working on weaknesses generally means acquiring skill sets and fixing mistakes that you're making in interactions. And baggage is often done through therapy, assuming we're talking about emotional baggage, right? So that's often done through therapy or through therapy-like things like cognitive behavioral therapy, right? So the therapy is really good for that. And I know in some countries there's a stigma to that, but it is, assuming you have a good therapist, therapy is invaluable if you have baggage. And almost all of us have baggage. So really, really important thing I recommend for basically everybody. You just have to find a good one, because there's a lot of garbage therapists out there. So that will be the baggage side. On the weaknesses, most of what you're going to do to absolve or to fix those weaknesses are going to involve some sort of dating. So you can actually knock out two birds with one stone. Now, you're not going to find you're not going to find your dream girl or whatever during this process, because it takes a while, right? But what's going to happen is in the weakness process. So for example, say the weakness is I don't know how to flirt or I don't know how to attract. What you're going to do to fix that is go out and do a lot of repetitions on, say, learning how to attract, or learning to do storytelling, or learning humor, how to make people laugh or whatever. And in that process, you're going to go on some dates, and it's going to give you some dating experience on top of that. Again, you probably aren't going to meet your soulmate this way, but that's a good thing, because you're not ready for her anyway, right? But in that process, you will be dating some, and you'll get some experience there, but you'll also be working on yourself and working to be better. So you don't need to wait, like do all the training and wait for the perfect moment to date. It doesn't work like that. It blends together. So as you're training, you're getting some dating experience and you're doing kind of your cross training through all that. And hopefully you have the skill set so that when the time comes, you're ready to capitalize and you know what to do. And that's the end goal there.
I definitely recommend at minimum, though, is you have a really thorough understanding of your attachment style and understanding how that plays into everything, because it will taint your interactions with people, especially when you get close relationships. And also having an understanding at base level your traumas as each one plays out in your everyday life. Because when you're going to date people, you need to understand how those traumas might come out. So, for example, if you have some kind of abandonment trauma and you are dating, you want to look for how that is going to come out in your dating world. So, for example, if a girl doesn't get back to you straight away, are you getting flustered and getting upset? Is that sometimes it's not a skill set thing. Sometimes it's because you have a panic of, oh, she's ghosting me because this is what I've always experienced. This is what I experienced in my childhood. So like Fuji said, therapy is really good to make sure you're at least understanding at a base level how your traumas are presenting, so that when you're going through the dating process, you can keep an eye on that and you can use the dating process to also help you work on that, so that when you do get into a long-term relationship, you're already on it. You already know, if you make a mistake, you already know how to say, hey, look, sorry, I was experiencing this trauma I have. I'm sorry that I said blah, 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 or did this or didn't make you feel understood in that way. And that's really important because that shapes everything that we do. And a lot of people don't realize how much that shapes every single thing that we do. And then once you're getting into that relationship, people, if the right person, will work with you and on your weaknesses, and they'll be understanding. But it is, I always like to say, the trauma itself isn't your fault, but how you behave with that trauma, how you put it onto someone else, is your responsibility. It's your responsibility to control that, to make sure you're not hurting the other person and damaging them emotionally, or whatever that may be.
Yeah, a lot of people, you'll often hear people say like, oh, I'm doing whatever, I'm working on myself, right? I like the concept. I don't like the execution, because when you ask them, well, what are you doing to work on yourself? It's always vague. It's always like, well, I'm learning to accept myself. I'm like, so what are you doing for that? Well, I'm just like thinking about why I'm worthy. Are you really, though? A day to day, are you doing anything, or is it just something that sounds really good? If you're saying you're working on yourself and you can't rattle off 5 actionable things you're doing to get better, to be better, you're in a pipe dream. You're not working on yourself. You're fantasizing. You're saying that to make yourself feel good. You're not actually working on yourself. If you're going to therapy, you're in the gym, you're working through your own traumas, you're reading books you're reading books on attachment theory, you're going out and approaching people, trying to learn how to keep a conversation going, you're maybe doing drills or exercises for that. That's working on yourself. Not being a holistic person in my spirituality. That's not working on yourself. That's blowing smoke up your butt and trying to imagine that you're doing something when you're really not,
So there's a book I'll just quickly recommend, because I know some people can't afford therapy, but they still do very much want to work on these things. So the best attachment theory book I find is actually not the one Attached, which everyone recommends.
Yeah, I've got to be honest, by the way, I'm just going to say it straight. I did not like that book at all. I thought the solutions in there were just so... I really
it's a bit vague.
I read it recently because there's someone, one of my clients mentioned it. I thought, I'm just curious, let me have a look at it and stuff and see what it's spouting in there. And I read it. I was like, oh God, I hope too many people don't read it. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but I just think,
unfortunately, that is the number one recognized attachment book. So I always like to not recommend that and instead recommend one that's called Love Me, Don't Leave Me by Michelle Skeen. And the reason why I love that, it's great, especially if you are anxious attached, but it's great for everyone because she actually has worksheets in there. And in those worksheets, she can allow you to go through these exercises that can have you really pinpoint the exact things that triggered you as a child, the exact traumas and things that you just never even considered or thought of. That book was the biggest, oh my gosh, like I didn't realize that moments in my life, like just repetitive through that book. And at the end of that, when you fill out all those exercises she says, you'll have a really clear understanding of what your traumas are, where they come from, how they manifest in your life, how they manifest in your relationships. And it's just such a great tool. So I'd really recommend everyone read that. It's on Audible. It's called Love Me, Don't Leave Me by Michelle Skeen. Absolutely amazing, especially if you cannot afford therapy.
That's a fantastic recommendation as well, and it's a good note to sort of start rounding off on as well, because I reckon we could easily go on for another couple of hours here as well. But I'm sure you guys want some breakfast, live your life. But your final thoughts and anything you want to share to anyone with regards to this particular subject as well. I totally wrote it the wrong way down. I'm looking at the thing and I'm thinking, I feel like
close enough.
Yeah, I feel like slapping myself like Will Smith did on Chris Rock.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So your final recommendations for people who are just struggling, in that situation where they're kind of meeting and not getting a lot of traction, and what could people do?
I think a big kind of overall concept or philosophy to have is if you're struggling with this and you're finding that that women are not attracted to you, or that the women will say, well, there's not a spark, right, or things like that. The first thing I would say is look inward and realize, what are you bringing to the table that someone that amazing that you're obsessed with would be attracted to? If you're not bringing enough to the table, be better. Work on what you bring to the table. And maybe if you're not tall, if you're not good looking, maybe you don't bring that to the table. Maybe you bring personality to the table. But you have to figure out, what do you bring to the table? Because why would someone else who's that amazing want to date you unless you are at their level? And it doesn't have to be physically, unless you're bringing enough to the table. And I think a lot of people have bought into this idea of like true love just is like, you see someone across the room and you just fall in love regardless of how much you bring to the table. And that's not how that works. Like, we don't think that in the job world. You're like, oh, I want a job being the CEO of Disney, but I've only worked at Starbucks, but it's meant to be. So I'll be the CEO. No, you won't. No, you won't. You don't have the experience, right? They will not ask for you to be their CEO. You have to have the experience first. You have to have the skills first, then you can become the CEO. It's not the other way around. And that's a weird, kind of weird idea in people's head that people haven't thought of, because it's not Disney. It doesn't sound good. It doesn't sound happily ever after. But when you look at it brass tacks, when you really look at what the world is like, you realize, oh, that makes a lot of sense. That actually is much more representative of what's actually going on than this fairy tale that we've been sold.
Yeah, I think we often say to our guys, you have to be willing to either work for what you want or lower your standards. Because if you want whatever you want, it has to be matched by how much work you're willing to put in, how much you're willing to try. If a lot of guys come to us, I want to date this type of woman, I want to date this type of woman, and it's like, are you, like Fuji said, what are you bringing to the table there? If that is what you want, and if you don't, that's fine. Some people are okay with whatever, mediocre, average, whatever you want to call it. They're okay with that. They don't want something overly special. That is fine. But the guys that do want that, the people that do want that, they really have to look into themselves and think, what can I do to get there? And then on the positive note, we personally would say that it's possible and it is very fulfilling when you do reach that goal, and it can happen. So also, even if it is hard and it gets you down sometimes, if you have that goal and you are willing to work for it, you will get there. We have plenty of students who are married, have kids with their dream partner, and it can happen. You just have to be willing to put the work in. But it's so, so, so worth it. It's absolutely so worth it when you do get there.
When people see my wife, they realize how hard I worked at myself.
One of my mentors had a quote that he told me when I was struggling, and he said, this journey is 10 times harder than you think it is, but it is 50,000 times more rewarding. And I always took that as a thing to fuel me when things were hard and it felt insurmountable, and I felt like I wasn't going to make it, or I felt like it was too difficult. And knowing that the peak of the mountain, the top of the mountain is hard, but it's always worth it. No one turns around.
I hate you.
No one at the top of that mountain looks down and was like, that climb wasn't worth it.
Yeah.
It's true. So true. You've inspired me to create a new term now, and I think I'm going to go with this one as well. Toxic fairy tales. I think that's true as well. I think the fairy tale idea that we've all been sold is actually quite toxic to most people. because it's made it seem so easy. And actually it's not. And the other quote I put out recently as well, I said to people, there's such a big difference between a wedding and marriage, and most people get the two confused. And they're in their head, they think the wedding is the whole marriage, but actually the real work begins after that day. Yes. And so we've got to have someone needs to bitch slap us at some point and give us they do. We need a reality check sometimes as well.
Will Smith is volunteered, by the way. He's volunteered to take.
I spoke to him earlier as well. And he said he'd do that.
Don't get me wrong. When you are in that relationship, it is magical. It does feel supernatural. It does feel like we've known each other before. It does feel all the great things, but you have to get there first. And I think people put the what is it, the horse before the cart before the horse, cart before the horse.
Yeah, that's it.
That's the one I meant.
I love it. Well, listen, I just wanted to say thank you to you both for coming on as well. It's been a pleasure, and I have to say, like Fuji as well, you've given some great one-liners today, I think, as well. And your examples today as well have kind of like just been the most unique on the Feel Inspired podcast so far as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Miyagi quote, the business quotes, I love all of it.
He loves a good analogy.
I do.
I love it too as well. I love a good analogy. I've made a note sometimes as well. I think we'll create some good sound bites out of this as well. But for anyone else out there, if you want to reach out to Nikki and Fuji, can you just tell everyone what's the best way that they can reach out to you as well, especially for the guys, because you guys focus on coaching guys specifically. Mm-hmm. So to any of the gentlemen out there, if you're struggling, then reach out to these guys as well. Do you guys give any sort of like free consultation initially as well?
Yeah, yeah, we have free consultations. Instagram, you can reach out on Instagram at BecomeSharp. Facebook, facebook.com/DJ Fuji.
And then the website is www.becomesharp.com. And there's an application on there to sign up for a free consultation.
Yeah.
So if you just fill that out, we'll be able to get back to you.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. I'll include all the links in the podcast as well. So if anyone wants to reach out to Fuji and Nikki, you can do as well. And I say to everyone, look, most coaches get out there, give some kind of free consultation as well. Utilize it, make the most of it. Because even just a tiny bit sometimes help. Even sometimes a free 30 minutes can be all the difference you need, or it could be a start of something amazing. So just go out there, start doing the work on yourself. And part of that is getting someone to help you, actually asking for help. Just like AN75 asked loads of questions today. It's great because someone else is going to read that thinking, shit, I wasn't the only one thinking of that. Great question as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thank you to you guys especially as well. Thank you to everyone who's been watching today for all the questions as well. You've been listening to the Feel Inspired podcast. I'm Amit Sodha, your delectable host, and of course I'll be back on the next episode. But thank you again, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure listening to you today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, man.
Stay with me. I'll end the broadcast, and I'll see you all on the next episode.